Welcome back, AP US History class, for another riveting round of notes with Mr. O'Toole. And today we get to talk about my favorite president of all time, Mr. Andrew Jackson. So the thing that we want to think about as we're going through this is thinking about how Andrew Jackson, how did his rise greatly change the early United States. Jackson was a man who truly put the focus of America on the common people. He took the words of the Declaration and made them much more of a reality than anyone previously had. At the same time, he used the presidential power more so than any president ever had before. He greatly increased what a president is and helped lead us to the type of presidents that we have in our country today. Before this, the president kind of made some ideas but stood in the background. Jackson made it all about the president. So when I think of Andrew Jackson and why I think of him as my favorite president in the United States, it gets me thinking to a modern day TV commercial. And the TV commercial goes something like this.
The police often question him just because they find him interesting. His beard alone has experienced more than a lesser man's entire body. His blood smells like cologne. He is the most interesting man in the world.
I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis. Stay thirsty, my friends.
That's it. I think of the Dos Equis guy, the most interesting man alive. Goes something like this, right? When I think of Andrew Jackson, I don't always break the rules, but when I do, it is the Constitution. Especially because at this time he was using the power of the Constitution more so than anybody else had before. And what makes him interesting is his story. His story is so different than the six guys that followed before him. The six guys before him, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and Quincy Adams, they were all relatively boring. They were from Virginia or from Massachusetts. They were members of the Founding Fathers. They were politicians basically from birth. They were lawyers. And their lives were kind of set in stone. They were the rich, elitist guys that we tend to think of as presidents today. Jackson was nothing like that. And as I alluded to in class and didn't quite get to today, this is his story. His story starts way back, right? So today we're going to talk about, Jackson in the West, all right? His story, though, it starts way back. And right now we'll look at the rise of Andrew Jackson. All right? So Andrew Jackson was an orphan teenager. He served as a messenger during the Revolution. He was taken prisoner by the British, and he showed off his rebellious spirit. So as I was saying in class, he was born. His dad died 2 weeks before he was born, and he was then forced to be raised by his mother and his older brother. And then, as I said, once the war started, they were forced to move from the back country, and his brother and mother both died, and he never really got over it and kept blaming the British for this. And then he showed off his rebellious spirit by refusing to clean the shoes of the general, as you can see there in the picture. The general proceeds to slice off his pinky and his ring finger on his left hand as a constant reminder to the British oppression that he felt. And then as he grows up, he gets a little older, becomes a land speculator, as it says in Howard Zinn, and he starts to actually make a little bit of money for himself. He was a self-taught lawyer. He basically studied under lawyers, and in that time, you didn't need to go to law school to become a lawyer, especially in the backwoods of Tennessee. He was also a big gambler. He loved to gamble on the horses. Frequently, many of his duels would be because of bets during gambling during the horse racing. He owned many horses that he raced. And then he married and met Rachel Lombard, his true and only love of his life. And the story on how he met her is very interesting. He was staying with another family member, a cousin, in Tennessee, and met Rachel and fell in love with her. They were married. What he did not realize is that Rachel was actually already married in a different state, and though she had thought she had gotten a divorce already, she hadn't. So really, she was married to two people at the same time. And this is something that would come back to haunt him in the election of 1828, but we'll get to that when we get to it. The other interesting thing about Jackson before his presidency is that, as I said, and as it said today, he was very, very, very short-tempered. Some used to say that his mouth would froth and like a rabid dog anytime he got mad. And he got in many, many duels in his lifetime. 10 are recorded. The most popular one being the one against Charles Dickinson, where he gets shot in the chest. But he wore a thick jacket that day, so the bullet didn't go in deep enough to kill him. And he then turns around and shoots Dickinson in the head and shoots and wins. And that's how he eventually is able to become president, because he's not dead. But that bullet would stay in his chest for the rest of his life and eventually would be the cause of his death due to lead poisoning. Took a long time, but Dickinson finally got him back. So, as I said, there's the picture again of the brave boy standing up to the British, getting ready to get his finger taken off. And then in 1812, Jackson, or 1815, excuse me, during the War of 1812, Jackson becomes the warrior. He leads his troops famously into battle, fighting both the Indians on the frontier and defeating the British in New Orleans, and then taking Florida from Spain. He really was a good general. He was able to get the troops to follow behind him. Sometimes, though, that was from really dirty practices. If certain guys were deserting, he would execute them as per the law to make sure, kind of like the idea of the beatings will continue until the morale improves. But he used great military power and great leadership to keep his troops in order, and becomes a military hero because of it, which would eventually launch him to the presidency. So the remainder of today's presentation will feature commentary from two guest speakers. And these guys kind of reflect the various feelings in the United States at this time. Our first guy is Farmer James McPoor, and he represents the common man, the everyman at this time, the guy that kind of loved Jackson. Whereas on the other side, you've got banker Alfred Featherbottom, who's basically Mr. Elitist that thinks he's better than everybody else and thinks that he can talk down and look down over his nose at the petulant little poor James McPoor. So they're going to go back and forth as we go through certain things. They'll add their commentary, and I'll comment on their commentary. So, yeehaw, dude! So Farmer James McPoor will kind of be a little southern accent, and then Mr. Alfred Featherbottom. 'Tis my great honor to make your acquaintance, viewer. I know, it's corny, but it'll help you get through the notes. So, the rise of Jacksonian democracy and the rise of the common man. Here in this picture, you can see the party that he threw. You can see hundreds of people located in and around the White House. He threw a massive party for a long time. The tragedy of it all. Once you let the rabble in, they won't leave. Probably have to trick those louts with some wine. Wine? Where? I want it. So, this was the political class in 1776 to 1824. Very hoity-toity party, pomp and circumstance. Oh, now this is the true display of how a gentleman should behave. Boring, right? None of you guys want to be at a party like this. Not very turned up. Not a good time. Nobody wanted to hang out. Now, after Jackson takes the presidency, there's a shift in the way the social classes act. And this was the political class between 1824 and 1836. Much partying, much bigger party. That right there, friends, in the middle is a giant block of cheese. Bro, this is how you party. Look at the size of the cheese, man. Woo, doggy. Of course, the rich guy doesn't like that very much. A rabble, a mob, scrambling, fighting, romping. But it was the people's day and the people's president. Very sarcastic in that, thinking that he doesn't care about the people. He cares about the rich man and the rich man only. right? So let's backtrack a little bit. That was his election party in 1829, but that's not where we start out. The election of 1824 was a very hairy election. We had 4 different guys that were running for election at this time. You got Andrew Jackson, you've got John Quincy Adams, who's the son of the second president, John Adams. You've got Henry Clay, who's ran for election more times than basically anybody else, except for maybe Ross Perot. And then you got Mr. Crawford, who nobody really cares about, don't really talk about, because he kind of just disappears. His votes aren't enough for him to really matter. So let's take a look at the popular vote during this election. Andrew Jackson received a whopping 41.3% of the vote. John Quincy Adams followed close behind with 30.9%. Then Henry Clay had 13%. And then Mr. Crawford at 11.2%. And he kind of just drops off. And you'll notice when you see the amount of votes he gets in Electoral College. So, how do you think Mr. McPoor is going to feel? Well, he's going to be ecstatic. Yeah, we won! We won! Not quite, Mr. Farmer McPoor. That's not how it works, right? And don't worry, Mr. Featherbottom will let you know. Silly farmer. You haven't read the Constitution. The president isn't elected by popular vote. As crazy as it sounds, our popular vote is not the way that we fully elect because we have to go through the Electoral College. So, let's take a look at the breakdown of the Electoral College of the election of 1824. Here's the electoral vote. Andrew Jackson receives 99. John Quincy Adams, 84. Henry Clay, 41. And Mr. Crawford, 37. So, Farmer James McPoor, of course, is going to go, yee-haw! We won! We won! Not so fast again. Remember, you need to earn a certain portion of the electoral vote. And Andrew Jackson did not reach that quota. Silly farmer. You haven't read the Constitution. You need a majority of the electoral votes. So, here we go. When the election's not decided by the electoral vote, it must go to the Congress, to the House of Representatives. So, Andrew Jackson, of course, he received the most votes, so he's very pleased at the fact that he was voted by the people. Henry Clay, however, in a backyard deal, supported John Quincy Adams so that John Quincy Adams would win. He got all the people that were voting for him in the House of Representatives to then vote for Quincy Adams. And of course, the deal was that Henry Clay would then become Secretary of State. Why this is important is because during this time, anybody that was Secretary of State kind of had that next doorstep to become the President of the United States. So it was a really key position for wanting to get people to become President of the United States. So how does Farmer James McPoor and Andrew Jackson feel? Now that's a corrupt bargain! They hated it. They thought it was the worst thing ever. Whereas the rich felt it's just smart politics, my friend. Of course, Andrew Jackson, though, was very, very displeased. He became very angry. He screamed out that it was a corrupt bargain. And basically, from the day that John Quincy Adams was elected in 1824 until 1828, he vowed to win that election. Literally like a rabid dog, just figuring out how he was going to trash Quincy Adams and get the presidential election in 1828. Jackson, a guy that's nuts, is not a guy that you want to make angry. Okay, he wasn't going to sleep until he could make sure that he had the presidency and that Quincy Adams could be taken care of. And he vowed basically to his death that he wished he had killed Henry Clay when he had the chance. So, the election in 28 is one of the biggest ones of mudslinging, where they're making wild charges and lies about each candidate. Lots of bad things being said about each other, even worse so than the election of 1800. It seems like every election gets dirtier and dirtier and away from politics. Right? They talked about, Andrew Jackson's clan talked about, you're a money-loving dirtbag, talking about that you only care about the rich and not the common man, and you don't care about anybody else. And John Quincy Adams fired back with, your wife is a two-timing whore. Basically, that was the biggest hang-up. They talked about his wife and his personal life like crazy. They just kept throwing mud after mud after mud after each other, and just basically hurled any types of charges that they could to make people hate the other candidate, much like the political ads that we see today. Oh snap. Oh snap indeed, right? These charges help split the country, and however, because Jackson was for the common man and because Quincy Adams was doing a really bad job in his 4 years, Jackson won by a lot. And it brings about this new democracy. Up until this point, we had basically believed in the idea of Jeffersonian democracy. And that belief was simple, that the people should be governed as little as possible. And even though Mr. Featherbottom, the rich, disagreed with Jefferson because he was from the South, I may have disagreed with Jefferson on many things, but at least he was right about that. The rich do not want people governing them because it usually infringes on how rich they can be. Jacksonian democracy, however, was the belief whatever government needed to be done, it should be done by the common man. There's a lot. There's like a lot of us, and like you shouldn't govern, and shouldn't government serve us, right? So the idea is that the government is here to serve the common man as opposed to the elite. And government by the majority of the people instead of a government by the upper class. So Jackson's ideas are very, very popular because of that idea that he's focusing on the majority of the people instead of just those upper class people. Why do you think there's such a big change? Well, let's take a look. What caused this change in United States history? Why was there this new move towards Jacksonian democracy? Jackson kind of got lucky. We had made the Louisiana Purchase 30 years later, and people now were finally starting to catch up with being able to spread. So population shift west. There was more individuality, and Jackson was popular because he was from the West. Remember, the West at this time was just basically on the edge of the Mississippi River. We hadn't really settled west of the Mississippi River yet, even though Lewis and Clark had explored there. So population density in 1790 looked like this. Most of the population is in New York City, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, with 90 or more people per square mile. The southern part of the United States, it has 6 to 18 people per square mile. And you look at all the unorganized territory in the Northwest Territory, there's 2 or less people per square mile. I mean, you're talking about a huge area of land that people are getting at this time. But slowly, by 1830, 6 to 18 people per square mile. You even have 45 to 90 in Kentucky and Tennessee. People are slowly starting to move west into the Louisiana Purchase. Missouri's a state by this point. Arkansas is a set territory. Michigan's a set territory. Illinois and Indiana are much more defined as states. Louisiana has become a state. So you're seeing the population start to become more and more dense further out west. And so this shifts the idea of what a person should be in government. And the next thing is that property ownership and education were not needed to vote anymore. Back in the days of the origins of the United States, you can see on the left that you needed to have property in Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, the Northwest Territory, Indiana Territory, Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and the Mississippi Territory. You needed to own property in these places to be able to vote. And only 2 states, Vermont and Kentucky, actually had universal male suffrage. What basically meant was if you were a white man, you could vote. By 1830, though, it had changed. Much different. You can see now, as long as you paid taxes in most territories in the United States, you could vote. And in fact, Maine, Vermont, New York, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and South Carolina all had universal male suffrage. And only 2 states, North Carolina and Tennessee, had property qualifications, which is kind of ironic because Tennessee is where Jackson was from, and they still needed property. Luckily, he had property, so they didn't have to worry about that. But you can see there's a shift in the idea of what you need to have to be able to vote, which means that more and more people are going to be able to vote. And it actually increases the number of voters. You look in in 1824, only 26% of the population actually voted. By 1860, 81% of the people that could vote did vote. Our percentages are much lower. We're actually down by like 50% right now. So we're right around where Jackson was. Only about 50% of our country that are able to vote actually does vote, which is pretty embarrassing when you turn around and say that more votes were cast for American Idol during its prime than was cast during the presidential election, even though those votes are skewed because you can vote 5 times for one person in American Idol, but it still shows the difference in the popularity. So then, of course, Andrew Jackson gets elected. He throws the greatest party ever. He allows any person and every person to come into the White House. They rip the White House to shreds, breaking windows and furniture and tearing things off the wall. I mean, it's like the song Welcome to My House Party, right? Or like Project X, where they're just like destroying everything. And then eventually he throws some whiskey out on the lawn and people go out to the lawn and he's able to get into the White House and start his presidency. So in the meantime, though, his wife dies, and he argues that Quincy Adams was responsible because of all of the mudslinging, and that she died because of a broken heart. He actually stays with her dead body for 2 weeks before he buries her. He doesn't want to let go, and once again proves the fact that he might be just a tad crazy. So let's look at his presidency. There's 3 major things that you should definitely remember for his presidency. One is that he tried to keep the Union together. All right, even though he's from the South, he had a big idea that the United States needed to stay together, and he did things to try to keep that happening. In addition, he vetoed the Bank of the U.S. Once again, he hated the idea of the rich controlling everything, so he said the Bank of the United States served the rich, so I'm not worried about it. He did not believe in paper money. He believed only in hard currency like silver and gold. And then finally, he's responsible for Indian removal, which is one of the biggest black eyes on our nation's history, besides, of course, slavery. Of course, Mr. McFarmer thinks they seem great, whereas Mr. Featherbottom says these seem awful. One of the things I want you to think about with this brain snack is you're going to end up pondering a question. You can pause the video and think about it for a second. I'm kind of just going to go through it. We would have a discussion about it in class, but it's something that I want you to think about as you go through this brain snack. And the thought should be, a new rule has been implemented to make lunch less chaotic. From now on, we'll excuse the lunch by floor each 5 minutes after last. Our floor will go last. What if our floor chooses to ignore the rule? What would you expect to happen to them if they did, right? So if we just dismissed lunch whenever we felt like, if we just went to lunch whenever we felt like, instead of our room or our floor having to be last, it would be chaos. I would expect Dr. Padua to go crazy on me for allowing the kids to go, and if I said that you guys went on your own, I'm sure you'd all be suspended and in trouble, right? So you can't ignore the rule. Well, this is exactly what South Carolina does during what's known as the nullification crisis. There was a tariff, and they didn't want to pay it. South Carolina then threatened to secede from the U.S., to leave the United States because of this tariff. They felt like this was ruining their economy. And so Jackson, after they nullified the tariff and declared it unconstitutional and refused to enforce it, Jackson turns around and got Congress to lower the tariff and give him the power to collect it by force if necessary. Force, of course, means moving the military in there and telling you what you're going to do. So Mr., of course, Featherbottom says, sounds like King Andrew I, which is a huge insult because you don't want to be labeled a king in the United States because of all the bad blood that we have towards Great Britain during this time. Of course, South Carolina decided to stay, but Jackson's Vice President Calhoun decides to resign. Way too complicated for Mr. McPoor, so he just goes along and agrees with Andrew Jackson. The nullification crisis is the first inkling that something might be bad on the horizon because South Carolina shows, hey, we can try to secede, and they will in fact be the first ones to secede during the slave times in 1860. But we'll get to that in a few weeks. The second thing that he Responsible for is what's known as Indian removal. Jackson hated the Indians, and that stems from the fact that he grew up in the backwoods of Tennessee and saw many a fight and many friends die at Indian hands and Indian violence during that time. He didn't forget that, and once he became president, he knew he would have a chance to take care of business, and so he does. He knew that the settlers wanted Cherokee lands for some safety, some farming, and some gold. We wanted to grow, right? Our elbows were rubbing too close together, so we wanted to make sure that wasn't happening anymore. So we start to settle in the Cherokee lands. Congress bought the land, but the Supreme Court said it was illegal. Jackson didn't care. Jackson didn't care that the Congress thought it was illegal, that the Supreme Court thought it was illegal. He said, went ahead with the plans. He said, John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. Basically calling Supreme Court out and says, stop me if you can. And he knew that the Supreme Court wouldn't stop him, so he then sends them, the Indians, away. Mr. Featherbottom, of course, is ignoring the Supreme Court too. Definitely King Andrew. Georgia forced the Cherokee to leave, leading to what's known as the Trail of Tears. Finally, someone is going to make the frontier safe. All those people living on the frontier that were fighting against the Indians were ecstatic that they now had room to do whatever they wanted. But it's known as the Trail of Tears, basically because of the black eye that it gives to the United States. Destroyed the Indian population, forced them to move off their own land, and continually just decimated them and helped kill them off. Right, here's a look at the Trail of Tears. You can see the people being forced by wagon train with everything that they owned. The Cherokee had, in fact, tried to assimilate to American culture, and it still didn't matter to Jackson. He still was ready to kick them out. So the question, of course, then becomes... I'll skip this a little bit. The question then becomes... was it right for Jackson to give new lands to the Native Americans and force them to live on it in order to guarantee their safety of the American settlers? So it's up to you to decide whether or not it's okay what Jackson did to garner these new lands. In fact, the other question is, was it inevitable that eventually we would have pushed west anyways and either fought with the Indians or forced them out again? If Jackson didn't do it, maybe somebody else would. It's a question that we can always debate throughout history as to whether or not it was inevitable. So the final thing that he does is he's worried about vetoing the bank. He hated the Bank of the United States. As I said, he hated money currency. So Jackson thought the National Bank made the rich richer and it cheated the farmers because it was paper currency, and he just didn't trust it. Being from the backwoods, he learned to trade actual goods, so trading paper didn't make him happy. He vetoed the bank's new charter. Take that, Richie Rich. Right? He vetoed the charter that would make the third bank of the United States exist, and he withdrew the government's money, and he essentially killed the bank. This sent the United States into a little bit of a free fall in 1837, called the Panic of 1837, because he took the government's bank, the money out of the bank, essentially killing it. Ignorant fool! It's going to ruin our economy, and it did just a little bit. But it's responsible for why we have different banks in the United States that you can go to now. So, but he did kill the bank. He didn't like Nicholas Biddle, the guy that created the bank or that worked in the bank at that time. That was the leader of it. So basically, he kills it, and we no longer have a Bank of the United States. So also in 1835, right? I remember we talked about that Jackson had an attempt on his life. He was the first president to almost be assassinated. However, the guns failed to go off, and then he beats him senseless with his cane. There was no Secret Service at this time, so Jackson just took care of it in his own regard. Once he's finished with his presidency, he selects Martin Van Buren to follow him up. Van Buren doesn't really have a successful presidency after him, and Andrew Jackson dies an old man in Monticello years later. So his legacy is simple. He kept the Union together. He had Indian removal and vetoing the Bank of the U.S. It's made him made many controversial decisions in his quest to empower the common man and a little bit to empower himself. So the question that you guys will be debating, of course, is, was he a hero? Does he deserve to be on the $20 bill? Or did he go too far? Did he abuse his power? Was he a bad guy? So I can't wait to hear the debate on this. I look for lots of different viewpoints. Make sure you come armed with your information. Good night, guys. Some believe he was the greatest man who ever lived. And of course, others say he was just a dirty peasant king.